Welcome back, survivors. I'm glad you could join us tonight. If you're enjoying these stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps keep the signal alive. And as always, drop a comment with your city or country. I love seeing where you're all listening from. The call came in just after 5 a.m., before the sun even cracked the horizon, before the morning shift could relieve the night crew, before coffee reached lips or keys hit locks. I was already awake. My body still ran on 20 years of routine. 4 a.m. rise, shower, boots laced, radio on. I was the warden of Blackridge Federal Penitentiary, and that morning, I knew something had shifted. The dispatch from County Emergency Services wasn't panicked. Not yet, but it had a different weight. Unidentified individuals approaching the facility perimeter. Unresponsive to hails, possible injuries, medical en route. Nothing in that line sounded urgent, but something in the voice said otherwise. I walked the upper mezzanine, overlooking cell block B. The inmates were restless. More than usual, some were shouting through bars. Others just stared at the blank concrete like they were listening for something I couldn't hear. By the time I reached the control room, the monitors confirmed it. 3 figures at the south gate, covered in blood, staggering, barefoot, shirts soaked to the waist. One of them slapped a palm against the chain-link fencing again and again, not like a man knocking, more like an animal testing for weakness. I keyed into the intercom for the gatehouse. Do not open the fence, repeat, do not engage, stand by for medical, keep your weapon drawn. The guard on post responded hesitantly. Sir, they're hurt. One looks like she's been torn up bad, might not make it unless we get her in now. I stared at the monitor, zoomed in on her face. Blood poured from her mouth, not from a wound, but like it wouldn't stop coming. Her eyes were open, milky, and still. That wasn't a person anymore. Evac is delayed. Hold the line, lethal force authorized if they breach. I rarely gave that kind of order, but I knew instinctively. This was no riot, no protest. This was something else. 5 minutes later, the first scream echoed from Block D. A guard named Robbins had been attacked in the mess hall, bit in the throat by an inmate already restrained. Both now dead. The infirmary door was locked. Medical refused to go inside. Then another call, this time from the yard. Sir, we've got movement on the hill. Looks like a crowd. No IDs, no order, just walking, straight at the perimeter. I climbed the nearest guard tower and looked through the binoculars. A wave of bodies, dozens, some sprinting, others crawling, some moving on all fours, dragging intestines behind them. What chilled me wasn't the gore, it was the silence. No screaming, no groaning, just motion. I got back on the radio, patched into Central Command. This is Warden Elias Granger, Blackridge Penitentiary, under potential biological threat, requesting immediate status on evacuation protocol and CDC containment. Over. The line crackled. Negative Blackridge, evac suspended, National Guard en route to major population centers. You are advised to secure in place until further contact. Over. They'd abandoned us. I looked around the tower, saw the wall, the razor wire, the sealed gates. This place was designed to keep people in, but it could just as well keep them out. Blackridge was now a fortress, whether I liked it or not. The main cell blocks were in chaos, inmates ramming doors, banging bars, yelling over one another. Rumors of infection had already spread. Some thought it was poison in the food. Others blamed the guards. More than one riot had started over less. I made the call to lockdown. From the command terminal, I keyed in the emergency override. Steel blast doors sealed the outer wings. Hallways snapped shut with a mechanical clang that echoed across the facility. Lights dimmed to reserve power. Every access corridor now controlled from the central hub. The guards, armed and shaken, stood by waiting for orders. Some wanted to leave. Others wanted to open fire on anyone moving fast. I addressed them in the command room. This facility was built to contain the worst of the worst, murderers, gang lords, bombers. We've held them for decades and never lost control. I paused, looked them in the eye. We will not lose it now. They nodded, some reluctant, others grateful. Then came the hardest part. We had to choose who stayed in and who stayed out. The outer gate camera blinked to life again. A man in civilian clothes, blood-soaked, was pounding the outer fence, his voice hoarse. "Please, please, my daughter, she's hurt. We need help." His hand held a little girl. Couldn't have been older than 9. She slumped in his arms, limp, pale. One of my guards turned to me. "We can't leave them out there. Sir, we can't. If I let them in, and the girl turned, we'd be done. If I didn't, we might be leaving a child to die." I gave the order. "Stand by. Keep the outer gate sealed. We'll monitor from camera. No entry until further notice." I turned away before I saw her fall. In the lower cell blocks, things had grown worse. A fight broke out over ration packets. 2 guards tried to break it up. One of them never made it back up the stairs. That's when I knew. It wasn't enough to contain them. I had to control them, which meant one thing: deciding who lived inside these walls, and who didn't. A buzzer sounded on the outer fence. Someone was trying to hack the keypad. Metal clinked. Wires sparked. On camera, I saw 3 inmates in orange jumpsuits, outside the wall. How they got out, I didn't know, but I knew they weren't infected. One of them looked straight at the camera, held up a crowbar, and began smashing the access panel. Inside, the infected we had locked in the infirmary were slamming the reinforced door, denting it, just barely, but it wouldn't hold forever. I stood alone in the command hub, hands clenched behind my back. Behind me, guards argued. Outside, madness grew. In here, I still had control. But how long that would last, I couldn't say. The infirmary door held for 6 minutes. That's what the logs said afterward. 6 minutes from first impact to full breach. Steel bent inward like it had been struck by a wrecking ball. Reinforced hinges popped free, and whatever was left of Officer Mendez and the 2 inmates inside came spilling out with the stink of rot and fresh meat. By the time my response team reached that corridor, the walls were streaked red. Bits of uniform clung to the handrails. Blood pooled under the med cart and ran in lines along the grated floor. The infection had made it deeper than I'd hoped, and faster than I'd feared. The guard who called it in was a rookie, Langston, barely 6 weeks into the job. His voice over the radio was shaking but clear. "Sir, they're moving fast, real fast. We need orders now." I gave them without hesitation. "Fall back to the upper level. Seal the east stairwell. Engage if approached. Double tap only. Headshots or nothing." It was the first time in my career I'd issued a direct order to shoot a man who hadn't raised a weapon. But these weren't men anymore. Langston hesitated on the line. "They were inmates, sir." I answered like stone. "No, now they're liabilities." He didn't argue after that. Control spread like fire. The guards fell back, doors sealed behind them, pathways rerouted. Every corridor locked into containment formation. Block F was lost but contained, at least for now. But that was just the start of the storm. In Block C, word spread like disease. Panic turned inmates into animals. Fists pounded metal. Plastic trays shattered against bars. Everybody screaming about the blood in the air and the screaming down the hall. I marched into that chaos with 6 armed men. Riot gear, batons drawn, masks on, shields up. My voice cut through the howling like a blade. "This block is under emergency lockdown. If you value your life, stand down and listen, now." Some stopped yelling, others didn't, so I made the next call. A flashbang detonated in the hallway. White light, one burst, then the silence that follows fear. "I don't care what you did to end up in here. Right now, you either follow my orders or you become part of the body count." I walked past their cells, looked each man in the eye. "We are at war, and this prison is now a battlefield." Some stared back with hate, some with fear, but none with defiance. That silence was all I needed. Back in the war room, I called up the inmate database, every charge, every psychological profile, every physical note. We needed boots on the ground, eyes in blind corners, hands that could weld, dig, carry, fight. And I didn't have enough guards left to cover the whole facility. So I circled names, dozens of them, red pencil on a greasy paper printout. Low risk, short sentences, military background, emergency services, clean record inside. Some of them were better qualified than my own officers. I called in the head of corrections, Deputy Wexler, showed him the list. He didn't like it. His face said it all. "You're going to let these bastards out, give them weapons, after what they've done?" I nodded once. "Not weapons, tools, and only the ones I control, under direct supervision, tight collars, short leashes. If they step out of line, we shut the door and leave them where they fall." His jaw clenched, but he said nothing else. By nightfall, I had 27 inmates standing in the cafeteria, ankles chained, hands loose, eyes watching everything. They didn't speak, some smirked, others looked down, but none of them looked grateful. That was fine. This wasn't about second chances. This was about survival. I laid it out clean. You work, you eat, you fight, you sleep inside. If you disobey, steal, injure, infect, you go back in your cell, or out past the fence, your choice. No one said anything until one man stepped forward. He was built like a truck, neck tattoo, face like chiseled stone, went by Mac. Serving time for armed robbery. "You asking us to build your castle, Warden, or die trying?" I didn't smile. "Both." I tossed him a ring of keys. "You're in charge of the welders, don't let me regret it." We started with the gates. Welded 2 wrecked buses sideways across the main entrance. Steel-reinforced fencing between them. Added plywood barricades and office desks behind them for makeshift cover. Sniper posts went up on the guard towers, spotlights wired to the auxiliary generator. The power grid was still unstable. Main generator flickered every time too many lights came on, so we stripped and used wings of copper and scavenged solar panels from impounded vehicles. Inside, the reclaimed, as I started calling them, worked in teams, guarded, watched, but efficient. Block D was turned into housing for civilians. The ones we let in, only a few so far, screened, isolated for 3 days, then assigned a cot and work detail. The rest waited at the outer fence. Some begged, some threatened, but none of them came through unless I said so. And I said no, because inside, we still had a chance. On the 3rd night, Guard Sanchez returned from his supply run, face pale, uniform torn, jeep bloodied. He'd been followed for 4 miles, lost his tail by doubling back over the bridge, but something had clung to the undercarriage. When he got out, the thing lunged. He put it down barely. We burned the body on the spot. That night, I stood on the south wall, looked out at the line of faces behind the fence, some human, some not. One of them caught my eye. He was in a suit, tie shredded, eyes bloodshot, skin pale, standing still in the floodlight glow, hands at his sides. Then he ran, full sprint, face locked in a grin. He hit the fence with a crack, snapped his own neck backwards, but kept twitching. We didn't shoot, didn't move, just watched. And behind him more were coming. One of the inmates, the welder named Briggs, stood beside me. He asked, "You think this place is gonna hold, Warden?" I answered without looking away. "It has to." But even then, I wasn't sure. That night, I dreamed of the cell doors closing, locking, one by one, until even I was on the inside. There was a shift I could feel in the air, not something you could mark on a chart or measure on a screen. Just tension, simmering low and steady like a boiler right before the whistle. I walked the yard before sunrise, no wind, no birds, just the hum of the auxiliary power system fighting to keep the floodlights running, and the metal scent of dried blood clinging to the chain link. 2 inmates, reclaimed now, stood guard beside the north fence, rifles slung, eyes scanning the trees. They didn't speak as I passed, and I didn't expect them to. Inside, we were making it work, on the surface, at least. We converted the visitation wing into triage, the guard break room into a comm station, patched together a surveillance network from salvaged parts, half the compound lit, half in shadow. And yet, there was quiet. Too quiet. The guards kept to themselves, still wore the uniforms, still carried the keys, but their confidence was cracking. Some stared at the reclaimed with clenched jaws. Others avoided eye contact altogether. Lines were forming, lines I couldn't afford. That morning, I ordered a full internal audit. Supplies, manpower, security zones. The reclaimed had already built a crude water filtration system, using old HVAC coils and buckets. A handful were welding improvised armor from scrap and riot gear. Others were building metal screens for the windows. They were working, and some of them, damn them, were enjoying it. Deputy Wexler wasn't. He stood in my office, arms folded, jaw set. "You're giving them too much room, Elias. They're smiling in the halls like they own the place." I didn't look up from the inventory sheets. "They don't own it, they're building it, and they bleed like the rest of us." He shook his head. "You keep thinking you can manage this, but they're waiting, just waiting for the right moment." I glanced at the wall clock. Another 10 hours until curfew. "Then we make sure the moment never comes." He didn't argue, but he didn't leave happy either. The trouble started with a radio transmission. Shortwave frequency, undirected, repeating the same message on a loop. "Refuge south of I-27, mile marker 81. Clean, secure, resistance welcome." We picked it up on one of the patched radios near the gym. The message wasn't what concerned me. It was the voice. Flat, calm, no panic, no fear. That kind of control meant organization. And organization, this early, meant military or worse. I called a lockdown on external patrols, no one in or out without clearance. But not everyone followed it. Just before midnight, one of the reclaimed Deshaun Brewer, former combat medic, slipped out through an old food service access tunnel, welded shut years ago, but apparently just enough space had been left for someone determined. He took a radio with him, and 2 days of rations. We didn't find out until he triggered a tripwire on the outer grounds, one of ours, meant to warn of incoming threats, not internal breaches. When we caught him, he didn't fight, just stood there with the radio in his hand, still tuned to that repeating signal. "I just wanted to see if it was real," he told me. I looked him in the eye and said, "You don't get to one anymore, not here, not now." I gave the order, back in his cell. The reclaimed didn't like that, especially not Mac. He came into the yard with a slow walk, arms crossed, voice low. "We've been building your walls, fixing your lights, guarding your people, and you toss one of ours back into a cage without even talking to us." I met him face to face. "You don't run this facility." "I do." He didn't flinch. "Maybe, but you need us more than we need you." He turned, walked away. That night, I doubled the watch. Not for the infected, but for the ones already inside. The next day, we found graffiti on the inner walls, words scratched into plaster and paint. "Better to die free than live caged." The gates swing both ways. And on the hallway just outside Block B, we all became prisoners. It wasn't just symbolism. It was warning. I knew I was losing grip, not of the guards, not of the fences, but of the line between order and resentment. That evening, I called a compound-wide assembly. Reclaimed guards, civilians, lined up in the main yard, under floodlights and watchful towers. I stood on the edge of the observation deck, looked down at all of them, and I spoke. "I'm not here to make friends. I'm not here to play favorites. And I sure as hell didn't survive 3 decades in this place by being soft. But this isn't about the past anymore. This isn't about crimes or uniforms or bars on a cell. We're in a new world, and the old rules won't carry us unless we choose to carry them ourselves. I don't care if you wore blue or orange or came in through the front gate bleeding. We are alive, and as long as I breathe, this prison, our prison, will stand." The crowd didn't cheer, but they didn't riot either. That was enough. For now. After the speech, I returned to my office. A guard was waiting there. Langston. Still green, but sharper than most. He had a folder in his hands, and concern in his eyes. "Sir, I found this in the surveillance review." He handed it over. Inside were still images, freeze frames from the north camera feed, taken at midnight. A man outside the fence, dressed like a civilian, but crouched low, wiring something to the panel. In his hand, a long wire cutter, rubber gloves. A signal flare clipped to his vest. And on the wall behind him, sprayed in red, "Let the gates fall." I stared at the last frame. The man turning, looking directly into the lens. And smiling. Not the grin of the infected, but the kind that knows exactly what it's doing. Someone out there wanted in. Not to be saved, but to see us crumble. And someone inside might already be helping them. I had the maintenance schematics spread across my desk, yellowed blueprints, corner stamp 1982, coffee rings and fingerprints long soaked into the fibers. Blackridge wasn't built for comfort, but it was built to last. What most didn't know, what even some guards never realized, was that beneath the cell blocks and security doors, there was a whole second world. Old service corridors, abandoned crawl spaces, tunnels for wiring, water, ventilation, things you didn't think about until they failed. And one tunnel in particular, Subutility Access Tunnel 12B. Welded shut after a chemical fire 17 years ago, allegedly sealed, allegedly dead. But the images Langston brought me didn't line up with that. The man seen crouching at the fence appeared again 3 hours later. But this time, he wasn't outside. He was inside the outer compound wall, visible for 3 frames near the old garden plot, then gone. No breach at the main gate, no triggered sensors, no movement on the roof lines. He didn't come through the fences. He came under them. I traced Tunnel 12B on the schematic. It used to connect to an old freight elevator beneath the supply wing. Shaft long disabled, access panel bolted. But bolts can be removed. I didn't wait. I took a squad, 2 guards, Mac, and the inmate welder Briggs, armed, silent, headlamps only. We moved through the dark belly of Blackridge, through hallways that hadn't felt boots in a decade, cobwebs like curtains, pipes hissing in the silence. The air got colder the deeper we went. Mac's voice low behind me. You ever ask why this place had tunnels in the first place, Warden? I didn't answer. Because I had, and I never liked the answers. We reached the old supply elevator. Welded bars had been sawed clean, bolts missing, panel bent open. Briggs crouched, examined the edges with his gloved fingers. Fresh work, days old, maybe less. He pointed to metal filings, scattered in a corner, untouched. Whoever had been down here didn't bother covering their tracks. We dropped down the shaft one by one, rope lowered, boots finding steel. At the base, there was nothing but black. Concrete, earth, rusted grates. Until we saw the breach. A hole, roughly 2 feet wide, dug through the far wall where the old tunnel was supposed to have collapsed. The air smelled wrong, damp, organic. Not like rot, but like soil turned and opened. Briggs stepped forward, ran his light over the edges. This wasn't dug from this side. He looked up. This came from outside something, or someone dug their way in. That's when we heard it. Not footsteps, not growls, but something softer. Dripping. Water, somewhere deep, plunking into pooled liquid. Then, a sound that didn't belong. Breathing. Wet, heavy, just beyond the curve of the tunnel. I motioned for silence. We held. Then movement. Fast. Scraping claws on stone. Something was coming, low to the ground, too fast for a crawl, too quiet for a full sprint. Mac raised his weapon. So did the guards. And then it stopped. Just out of sight. Then nothing. I stepped forward with my light, slow, controlled. And saw nothing. Just the wet floor. A few droplets of dark liquid. Thin trail heading back toward the breach. We didn't follow. We sealed the shaft with steel rods and welding torches. We bolted the elevator chamber shut and covered the door with cinder blocks. Temporary, but solid. Back in the war room, I brought in Wexler and my senior staff, laid out what we found. There's a tunnel breach from outside the wire. I pointed at the camera frames. Someone or something got in without triggering a single alarm. This wasn't an accident. This was calculated. Wexler leaned forward. Sabotage. I nodded once. Maybe more than that. Maybe infiltration, if they can get one inside. Who says there's not already 2, 3, hell 10? The air turned heavy. The guards looked at one another. Everyone was thinking it, but no one wanted to say it. We were no longer just defending from the outside. The infection, the threat, the enemy was already here. I issued new protocols. Random gear checks, keycard audits, surprise inspections on every living soul within the fence. Civilians reclaimed guards. No exceptions. It didn't go over well. 2 guards protested, claimed I was overreaching. I relieved them of duty. Briggs and the welders reinforced the northern walls. added floodlights on motion sensors, wired to propane backups in case the grid went dark. The reclaimed were quiet, but watching. More and more, when I passed the halls, I saw them grouped together, speaking low, too quiet to overhear. I had eyes, informants among both the guards and the inmates. One of them left a note in my office. Someone's planning to open the gates from inside. Soon. Might be Mac, might not. Watch the chapel at night. The chapel was a converted classroom, and used since the lockdown, supposedly sealed. That night, I waited alone in the hallway outside it. Lights off, gun holstered, ears open. It took hours, but eventually, I heard footsteps. Soft, deliberate. Two voices, one deep, one higher, both cautious. Then the scrape of a chair. Through the doorframe, I saw Mac, and another man, civilian, older, gray in the beard, speaking fast, urgently. I didn't move, didn't interrupt, only listened. What I heard made my blood freeze. They'll come for this place soon. Someone has to be ready. Someone has to let them in. When the time's right, Granger won't last. He's got too many enemies now, inside and out. Mac didn't reply. Just sat there, stone-faced, hands steepled. When the voices stopped, I was gone. Slipped back through the corridor, quiet as the grave. I didn't sleep that night. Just stared at the old prison walls. Wrote down everything I'd heard. And one word burned in the middle of the page. Coup. I didn't know who was leading it. Didn't know how far it had spread. But I knew one thing. It had already begun. There's a doctrine they drilled into us back when I first entered federal corrections, before I ever wore the warden's badge, before I'd walked a single tier. If containment fails, if order fractures, if the chain of command is broken beyond repair, you burn it down. No negotiations. No hesitation. Fire cleans what the human hand cannot. It was never official, never written in ink or typed on letterhead, but every veteran officer knew it. And now, I understood why. I didn't sleep after hearing Mac in the chapel. I sat in my office with the light off and my sidearm on the desk. Paper maps spread in front of me, circles drawn in red across the ventilation grid, the sublevel shafts, the sealed tunnels now reopened. I knew the coup wasn't a theory anymore. It was an inevitability. The only question left was who would strike first. Mac or me? I called in Briggs at dawn. His welding team had proven themselves disciplined, practical, brutal when needed, and he wasn't seen near the chapel that night. He arrived in silence, stood in front of my desk, grease on his collar, eyes clear. I need everything sealed, every tunnel, every crawl space, every goddamn crack in this prison that leads somewhere dark. I circled the breach points. Start with shaft 12B, then move to the chapel foundation. We'll collapse anything that isn't essential. He looked at the map, then at me. Why now? What changed? I didn't answer directly. Someone thinks this place belongs to them, and they're willing to open the gates to prove it. He nodded slowly. Understood. He didn't ask who. Didn't need to. Later that morning, I addressed the compound from the yard tower. Guards, reclaimed, civilians, everyone. This prison is no longer just a safe zone. It is a line in the sand. I kept my voice flat, measured. There are people out there who want what we've built, to take it, to destroy it, or to infect it from within. Eyes shifted in the crowd. Whispers began. So we are enacting the doctrine of fire. If it cannot be secured, it will be sealed. If it cannot be trusted, it will be burned. I paused. Let that sink in. And those found working against this place, against its survival, will not be caged. They will be cast out or put down. No debates, no hearings, just consequence. Silence followed. Then slowly, some nodded. Some didn't. Wexler found me back in the war room. He looked tired, haunted. You realize what you just said. You declared martial rule. Inside a prison already on edge. I didn't look at him. We've been under martial rule since the gates locked. Now it's just official. He didn't argue, but he watched me like he was seeing something he hadn't before. That evening, the first breach came. Not from outside, but from the kitchen. Someone had pried open a ventilation grate in the dry storage, squeezed through, and entered the generator hallway. The main grid went dark. Emergency lights flickered. Backup power kicked in. but only at 50%. By the time we reached the hallway, the saboteur was gone. But the panel was damaged, scorched, beyond quick repair. The prisoners in Block B began shouting again, banging on bars, chanting, "Free us, feed us, fight us." It wasn't fear anymore. It was anticipation. I pulled Mac aside near the loading dock, motioned for him to follow. He didn't hesitate, but his face was unreadable. We stood behind the storage trailer, wind cold, sky gray. "Did you open the chapel?" I asked directly. He didn't lie. "Yes," he said. "Why?" I asked. "Because people need somewhere to talk, somewhere you're not watching," he replied. "You know what they're planning," I said. "I know they're tired of being dogs on leashes." He stepped closer. "You treat us like hammers, but even a hammer wants a hand to hold it." I stared at him. "Don't mistake survival for freedom," I said. He nodded and walked away. That night, I activated Protocol 17. Scuttling procedure. Collapse of non-critical tunnels. Briggs and 2 teams worked through the night, planting thermite charges on the old shafts, sealing them in concrete. We lost access to 2 old laundry halls and a freight sub-basement. Acceptable losses. The next morning, we found a dead guard in the east stairwell. Stabbed multiple times, nothing stolen, no camera footage. The killer left only a word, scrawled in blood on the floor beside the body. Release. No one claimed the act. No one confessed. But I knew. The coup had begun. And worse, I was still expected to hold the line. At mid-afternoon, 2 trucks approached from the outer road. Civilians, 8 total, 1 visibly infected. They begged through the fence. The man bitten held his wound like it might fall off. "We've got kids, please, we'll quarantine. We just need water, food, anything." The youngest boy couldn't have been more than 5. One of my civilian aides turned to me. "We have the space. We can isolate them in the old intake ward. There's still clean water." I looked through the fence. I saw desperation. I saw infection. I saw a future I couldn't allow. I said no. When they didn't move, I raised my hand. The sniper fired once. Not to kill, to warn. But they got the message. They left. Slow, silent. That night, I sat in the watchtower and listened to the wind. I thought about the doctrine, about what we'd already burned, and what we might still have to. And I realized, it wasn't just the tunnels that needed sealing. It was the people, the ideas, the hope. Hope was the breach now, and it had to be cauterized, before it consumed us all. The sniper round I ordered to fire as a warning didn't just echo across the yard. It rippled through the entire population. Within hours, I could feel the tension turn jagged. The guards watched the reclaimed like they expected knives in the dark. The reclaimed stared back like they were weighing how many guards it would take to seize control. They weren't wrong to wonder, and I wasn't wrong to suspect. That was the line we all balanced on now, narrow, cracking, ready to snap. The body of the murdered guard had been moved to the old chapel. No funeral, no eulogy, just wrapped and stored away from sight. We didn't have the time, or the comfort, for grief anymore. We had other problems. Late that night, Langston stormed into my office, face pale, hands trembling slightly. "Sir, you need to come to the intake ward, now." I didn't ask questions, I followed. What I found waiting changed everything. He was handcuffed to a radiator, half conscious, bleeding from his left side, filthy, wearing torn civilian clothes under what had once been a prison jumpsuit. He lifted his head as I stepped closer, and I felt the blood in my veins turn colder than the wind outside. It was my brother, Caleb Granger, 10 years younger, a face I hadn't seen since before the outbreak, before he'd been transferred out of Blackridge and into another facility on the other side of the state for gang involvement and repeated escape attempts. Last I heard, he'd been presumed dead during a riot that leveled half the county lockup. Yet here he was, alive, bruised but alive. I walked, I crawled, whatever it took. "I came here because you're the only one who'll listen," he coughed, winced from the pain. Langston looked at me. Found him near the East Watch fence, passed out, radio clutched in his hand, had this tucked in his belt. He handed me a blackened flash drive. Caleb nodded, eyes locked to mine. I've seen what they're doing out there, Elias. There's a group, organized, former CDC military types. People who didn't disappear, they went underground. He shifted, grimaced. They're working on something, a cure, real science, not rumors. I saw the labs, saw people strapped down, immune, being studied, used. He swallowed hard. They're calling it the Lazarus strain. Some think it's hope. Others think it's just controlled by another name. Doesn't matter, because what matters is they're looking for hosts, people who survived bites. He looked down at his arm. Rolled up the sleeve. The bite scar was fresh, partially healed. No sign of infection. The room went quiet. I stared. No fever, no aggression, nothing. He said, "They want to figure out why, and they'll do anything to get their hands on people like me." He leaned forward, shackles groaning. "I didn't come to be saved. I came to warn you, because they'll find this place soon, and when they do, they'll want inside." He held up the flash drive with a shaky hand. "This is logs, frequencies, base coordinates, whatever they couldn't encrypt. I stole it, but I couldn't decode it." He coughed again, more blood this time. "I'm not here to ask for your forgiveness. I'm here because you need to decide what kind of warden you're going to be." His voice faded into silence. Wexler entered behind me, caught the last part. He took one look at the flash drive and said, "We can't trust this. He's a convict, same as the others. He's just better at talking." I didn't respond. I stared at the data stick, and then at my brother. I ordered him moved to an isolated cell in Block D. Clean water, basic supplies, no contact. Then I gathered the council. The highest-ranking guards, the reclaimed reps, civilians. Everyone. I laid it all out. There's evidence, real evidence, of something bigger than infection, of something that might change everything. But it's out there, and right now we're still here. I held the flash drive in my palm. If we ignore it, we might die behind these walls, fortified and forgotten. If we pursue it, we open ourselves to risk, attack, betrayal from inside and out. I looked across the table. We have one shot to send a team outside, scout, gather intel, verify the claim. Only one. The room stayed quiet. Then Max spoke. "I'll go." He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. So did Wexler. "No, he stays. He's too valuable here." Others chimed in, arguing, splitting, sides forming like tectonic plates, until I slammed my hand on the table. "We pick a volunteer team, 3 at most, armed, radioed. No one leaves until they check in from the first marker." I locked eyes with Mac. "You lead them, but if you deviate, you're not coming back," he nodded. Briggs stepped forward. "I'll go too," and then unexpectedly Langston. "I'll make the third." I looked him over. Young, but steadier than most now. I approved. They left at dusk, through the secondary gate. 3 shadows moving into an infected world. And I watched them until the dark swallowed them whole. 2 nights later. Radio silence. Nothing. Not even static. Just dead air. I stood alone in the war room, flash drive still clutched in hand, monitor showing their last GPS ping, an intersection near the old chemical refinery. Then, a knock. Civilian runner, breathless, panic in his eyes. "Sir, there's a group at the outer fence, 4 of them, armed, not infected, saying they're from the Council of Renewal. They say they're here for the asset." My blood went cold. They knew. They had come for my brother. The war hadn't just arrived. It had walked through the front yard and asked politely to be let in. They stood outside the main gate, 4 figures in mismatched gear, armor-plated from old military kits, cleaner than any survivor had the right to be. Each of them carried rifles but didn't raise them, too confident, too poised. The one in front, a woman with short gray hair and eyes like glass, spoke into the intercom with a voice that didn't waver. "This is Commander Adelaide Voss, acting liaison for the Council of Renewal. We are not hostile. We are here to retrieve a subject of interest currently inside your facility. We have authorization for transfer under the Lazarus Protocol, Section 4, Priority Alpha." I'd never heard of the Lazarus Protocol before Caleb brought it through the fence. Never saw any documentation. Never got a warning from the state. Nothing from what remained of the federal chain of command. because it wasn't part of our government. Not anymore. I stepped up to the intercom myself, voice steady. This is Warden Elias Granger, Blackridge Federal Penitentiary. This facility is under independent lockdown and martial governance. Entry is denied. Subject in question is under protective quarantine. I watched her through the camera. She didn't blink. Warden, our intel suggests your facility is currently experiencing internal unrest, escalating sabotage, and unstable power systems. Her voice remained calm, clinical. You are operating beyond sustainable parameters. This individual is not yours to keep. He's property of the Lazarus Initiative now, whether you recognize that authority or not. I didn't answer immediately. I let the silence stretch. I watched the way she stood, shoulders square, posture unshaken. She didn't come expecting a discussion. She came expecting compliance. I cut the feed and ordered a full perimeter lockdown. No one in, no one out. Wexler stormed into the tower less than 10 minutes later, red-faced, furious. You just turned away the only organized group we've seen since this whole mess began. You think that's smart? I pointed at the monitor. They didn't come to help. They came for leverage, and I won't give it to them. He slammed his fist on the table. You're going to start a war. I looked him dead in the eye. No, I'm refusing to lose the one bargaining chip we have. I paused. And if that means war, then so be it. Down in the holding wing, Caleb hadn't moved much, still chained, still silent. I entered the room alone, pulled a folding chair from the wall, and sat opposite him. He looked worse. Pale, sweat on his brow, but still no fever, no signs of infection taking root. You told me they'd come. I said. He nodded. They always do, just takes them time to catch the scent. He coughed hard, wiped blood from his mouth with the back of his sleeve. They don't want a cure, they want control. If they find someone who survived a bite, they don't treat them, they dissect them. His voice cracked but didn't break. You can give me back if you're scared, but you already know what they'll do to me. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out the flash drive again. We'd decrypted part of it, thanks to Briggs and a technician who used to work municipal IT. Coordinates, dozens, some marked red, others green. But one, just one, circled in blue. A research site beneath an abandoned hospital complex, one county over, tagged as LVX-04. Wexler didn't want to talk about it. He said we needed to hand Caleb over and bargain. But that wasn't survival. That was surrender with manners. And I wasn't built for that. The next night, the breach alarm screamed through the walls. But not from the outer perimeter. From inside. One of the chapel walls had been caved in from the old furnace tunnel we thought we'd sealed. A shaped charge had been used, military grade. 3 intruders got through, dressed like scavengers, but moved like trained operators. 2 were taken down in the lower hallway by the guards. The 3rd made it as far as the med wing, where Caleb was being held. When we got there, he was already dead. The attacker, not Caleb. The room was dark, only red backup lights blinking. I entered and saw the blood first, then Caleb, crouched over the body, holding a blade slick with crimson. His hands shook, but his voice was calm. He was going to put something in my fore. He looked at me. I think it was meant to kill me, quiet, clean, no mess. I looked down at the body. Inside his vest, padded with layers, I found a folded piece of paper. Coordinates. Same blue circle as the one on the flash drive. They weren't just here to retrieve Caleb. They were here to make sure no one else found the lab. That changed everything. I called a midnight council meeting. No seats. No time for ceremony. Just facts. I told them what happened. Told them what we'd decoded. Told them I was leading a team to the lab site. Wexler objected first. You're the warden. This place falls apart without your hand on it. You walk out those gates and everything you built crumbles. I didn't argue. I just said, it's already crumbling, and if there's even a chance that place holds something real, something that can stop this, I'm going to find it, or die trying. Max stepped forward. I'll go, he said. Langston, who had returned just hours before from the previous mission, nodded. So will I. Briggs didn't speak, but he stepped beside them. The team was forming itself. We gathered gear, maps, makeshift armor, drove a reinforced truck through the south barricade at first light. The compound shrank in the rearview mirror, brick and steel fading into mist. And still, no contact from the council again, which only made it worse, like a storm that vanished, waiting to hit harder. As we crossed through burnt-out neighborhoods and overgrown highways, I kept thinking about Caleb, still locked inside Blackridge, still holding on to life by threads. A man I once thought lost to time, now possibly the reason the world might shift. If this Lazarus lab was real, if the data on that flash drive wasn't just bait, then everything I'd done, all the choices, all the blood, might finally mean something more than survival, might mean salvation. But a voice in the back of my mind whispered, or it might mean extinction. We reached the outer edge of the blue circle by noon. LVX-04 sat buried beneath what used to be St. Adeline Memorial Hospital, a 3-story shell of concrete and ash that had collapsed inward during the early days of the outbreak. There were no signs of recent activity above ground. No vehicles, no footprints, no watchtowers. But the silence felt wrong. Too still, too perfect. Mac parked the truck beside a rusted ambulance shell, engine idling low. Briggs scanned the surroundings with a field scope we'd salvaged from the armory. No movement, no heat signatures, but there's power. He pointed toward the building's west wing. A faint pulse of light blinked every 10 seconds from beneath a debris-covered stairwell. We moved carefully, Langston covering our rear, me leading down the fractured hallway that once served as an emergency entrance. The stink of mold and old blood hit first. Then the cold, deeper than outside, artificial. We found the entry hatch beneath a plastic sheet and a layer of scorched rubble. Steel, reinforced, unmarked except for a single handprint scanner long dead from corrosion. Someone had forced it open from the inside. Beyond it, metal stairs spiraled down into the dark. We descended in silence, 50, maybe 60 feet, until the tunnel opened into a chamber of flickering white light and reinforced glass panels. This was no makeshift lab. This was government-built, designed to last long after the world above fell. Langston moved to the control panel. Briggs checked the air for contaminants. Everything still functioned, but no one was here. Not anymore. Files were scattered across metal desks, some burned, others neatly stacked. A dry erase board bore scribbled sequences and chemical symbols that meant nothing to most of us, but one word stood out: reversion. I opened a sealed drawer and found hard drives, labeled with serial codes and the council's emblem. And beneath them, a tablet still holding power. One video file, time-stamped just 3 days before. I played it. A man appeared on screen, mid-40s, lab coat, face pale with exhaustion. My name is Dr. Edwin Ralston, lead virologist, Lazarus Initiative, Protocol Unit LVX-04. We were tasked with refining the carrier sequence derived from immune subjects. We've failed. He paused, glanced off camera. Symptoms in host subjects reversed for up to 8 hours. Cellular repair held. But neurological regression remained. Subjects became lucid, spoke, cried, then deteriorated violently, more aware, more dangerous. He swallowed hard. We isolated one, designation Theta, 7, female, bite survivor. Resistance held for 11 days, but she began hallucinating, screaming in foreign languages, sweating black, before full collapse. He leaned closer. There is no cure, not from what we know. Only delay, only control. And the council doesn't want salvation. They want power, compliance, obedience, using the virus as a lever to build a new world on our bones. The video glitched, then cut. Silence returned. Langston whispered, "So that's it, no redemption, just lies." I felt the weight settle on my chest. The council hadn't come for Caleb because he was hope. They came because he was leverage. They'd use his blood, his survival, his name, to legitimize whatever control scheme they'd already put in place. Not a cure. A collar. Mac moved to a side door. "I found something," he called out. We joined him. It was a containment cell, glass walls, bed, restraints. Inside, dried blood smeared across the floor. And etched into the surface, fingernails had carved words. Please let me die. We left the lab in silence. We torched it, not because it was protocol, but because no one should ever find it again. We used thermite from our supply packs, poured it into the mainframe core, and dropped a flare. The heat was blinding. The last thing I saw as we walked away was the Lazarus emblem melting into slag. We returned to Blackridge under a gray sky. Found the front gate open, smoke rising from inside. I ran, past burned-out vehicles, past bodies, guards and reclaimed alike. The chapel was in ruins. The mess hall caved in, and in the yard, on his knees, blood pouring from his side, was Wexler. I dropped beside him, grabbed his hand. "What happened?" I asked. He coughed, smiled, bitter and weak. "They made their move. Mac was gone. You were gone. Someone inside opened the gate." He looked toward the admin wing. "Caleb's gone. They took him. Council strike team. Dropped in from a chopper. Hit fast, silent, too clean for scavengers." My heart twisted. "They'll use him. Turn him into a symbol. A lie." Wexler nodded. "I tried. I held them back. But we're cracked now. Elias, splintered. This place might not hold much longer." His breath hitched. "You were right to leave, but maybe too late to come back." His eyes faded, still open, still staring. I stood, looked out across what was left. Smoke curled into the sky. The floodlights were still on, still powered. But the people, they were breaking. Briggs limped up, face ash-covered. "We've still got 25 survivors, few reclaimed, some civvies. Langston's holding the north stairwell. We can hold, but not for long." I looked toward the east, where the council had flown, and I understood. Control wasn't about fences or walls. It wasn't about protocol or oaths. It was about truth. And now I had it, and they were trying to bury it again. But I wasn't going to let them. Not this time. Not after everything. I holstered my weapon, grabbed the final backup copy of Ralston's confession, and handed it to Langston. "If they want war, we give them one. But we tell the truth while we fight it. Ashes or not, the world will know what they did, and who stood against it."